I didn't expect my Saturday morning grocery run to turn into a full-blown battlefield, but the moment I stepped out of my Jeep Wrangler, I felt that thick, suffocating tension in the air that tells you trouble is waiting, just out of sight, hiding behind something ordinary. The sun was warm on my shoulders, the grocery bags cutting into my palms, and the chirping birds in the HOA neighborhood made everything seem too peaceful, too staged, like a painting hiding a secret underneath the brush strokes. I had just moved into this quiet suburban street 3 months ago after returning from deployment, keeping my identity low-key, blending in like any other neighbor who just wanted a simple, calm life. The breeze carried the scent of fresh, cut grass mixed with jasmine from the neighboring yard, and I inhaled, hoping the day would stay peaceful. But my instincts, those instincts that saved my life more times than I could count, kept warning me that something wasn't right, that someone was watching me too closely. And sure enough, the moment I reached my driveway, a voice screeched from across the street with the force of breaking glass. Karen, she came stomping toward me in her ridiculous floral robe and slippers, her finger pointed like a dagger, her red hair frizzing outward as though even her hair wanted to escape her temper. "What do you think you're doing?" She shrieked, her voice loud enough to startle the neighbor's small dog into barking like it sensed danger. I turned slowly, gripping the grocery bags tighter, feeling the straps digging deeper into my skin, but refusing to give her the reaction she was trying so desperately to provoke. Her son, all scruffy, looking maybe 18, maybe a little older, hovered behind her with crossed arms and a smirk that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. His eyes flicked from the bags in my hands to my face, and there was something vile in them, something hungry, like entitlement given physical shape. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from because this story gets insane real fast. Karen marched right up to me, stopping so close I could smell the sour scent of stale coffee on her breath as she jabbed her finger toward my groceries. "Those," she barked, "those are ours." I blinked, honestly wondering for a moment if she was delusional or playing some twisted HOA power game again. "Excuse me," I asked, keeping my voice calm, controlled, intentional, the way I had learned during tense operations overseas. She jabbed again at the bags. "My son said you took his groceries from the truck." The boy behind her nodded proudly as if the accusation was some sort of achievement. "Yeah," he muttered, "you grabbed my stuff. Hand it over before I call the cops." For a moment, I just stared at them as my brain processed the insanity. My receipt was literally still sticking out of one of the bags. The hum of a passing car, the distant lawn mower, even the buzzing of a bee circling the flowers near by felt louder than their ridiculous accusation. I looked at the boy directly, scanning his expression, evaluating whether he truly believed the lie or was simply testing me for a reaction. His smirk widened, showing he was enjoying this. He wanted a conflict. Karen puffed her chest dramatically, stepping closer until her shadow fell over me. "Give us the bags," she hissed, emphasizing each word like she was handing down a sentence. The moment she reached out and tried to grab one, I instinctively pulled back, not aggressively, but firmly. Controlled, decisive. Her eyes widened at the resistance, and she gasped theatrically like she had been assaulted. "He pushed me," she screamed, her voice slicing through the air with alarming volume, and instantly heads began to turn from nearby porches. Neighbors peeked through blinds, some stepped outside, curious, concerned, confused. The dog barked louder, and the boy burst out laughing, pointing at me as if the scene was some kind of comedy show he had orchestrated. I stood completely still, my pulse steady, breathing measured, because if I learned anything in the service, it's that losing control gives the enemy exactly what they want. But she didn't care about truth. She cared about spectacle, about attention, about chaos. When she whipped out her phone and dialed 911, screaming assault, into the receiver, that was when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding, this was war. There was a flicker inside me, that silent steel that only surfaces when someone crosses a line so far it becomes dangerous for them. I held my ground, hearing her lies spill into the phone, hearing her son snicker behind her like a hyena circling prey. And all the while I kept my expression neutral, waiting, calculating, listening to the sound of sirens beginning to grow in the distance. The sirens grew louder, echoing through the perfectly trimmed yards and polished driveways, bouncing off the neat row of identical houses like a warning that the peaceful facade of this neighborhood was about to crack wide open. Karen paced back and forth in front of me, clutching her phone like a trophy, breathlessly narrating her fabricated play-by-play to the dispatcher, adding dramatic flair as though she were auditioning for some amateur community theater role. Her son lounged behind her, leaning against their mailbox, arms crossed, smirk glued to his face like he had already won some imaginary battle. The neighbors were gathering now. Mrs. Thompson from 2 houses down, Mr. Lewis with his evening jog interrupted, even old man Grayson, who rarely left his porch, shuffled out with narrowed eyes. I stood in the middle of my driveway, grocery bags still in my hands, and felt the weight of dozens of eyes on me, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I scanned the environment, taking in the muffled whispers, the curious glances, the judgmental stares seated by Karen's explosive theatrics. It was surreal watching her spin lies with so much confidence that some people actually hesitated, unsure what to believe. The police car pulled up fast, tires crunching on the pavement, blue and red lights flickering across Karen's triumphant face. She straightened her robe, smoothed her hair dramatically, then ran toward the officers like a damsel in distress, waving her arms while shouting, "Officer, he attacked me. He stole our groceries and threatened my son." The officers stepped out, calm, professional, but instantly overwhelmed by her shrill narration. I could see their eyebrows lift as she rambled on, her gestures wild, her voice cracking with fake emotion. The boy chimed in with a half-hearted "yeah, he shoved her," while avoiding eye contact with the officers. I waited quietly, bags at my feet now, hands visible, posture relaxed but alert. When the first officer turned his eyes to me, something changed in his expression. He wasn't buying her act, at least not entirely. "Sir, can you explain what happened?" he asked, his tone even, his gaze sharp, studying my calmness. Karen scoffed loudly. "Don't listen to him. He's dangerous." The officer raised a hand to silence her, but she kept ranting until the second officer guided her aside. I took a slow breath, letting the air fill my lungs before answering. "I came back from the store," I began, voice steady, "and she accused me of stealing groceries. These are mine," I added, pointing to the receipt sticking from the bag. The officer followed my gesture, spotting the receipt instantly. Karen's face flushed red, not from embarrassment but fury that her lie had been punctured so quickly. "That receipt means nothing," she shouted. "He probably switched bags or printed a fake one." Her son added, "Yeah, he's lying." The officer turned to the boy and narrowed his eyes. "Did you purchase any groceries today?" The boy froze, blinking rapidly. His hesitation hung in the air, heavy and incriminating. The crowd began whispering, doubt creeping through the block like a spreading stain. The officer pressed again, "Do you have a receipt?" The boy swallowed hard, then shrugged. "I left it in the truck." Karen nodded aggressively, "Yes, in the truck." The officer looked past them at the empty driveway. "No truck." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but she quickly jumped in with another lie. "Well, we parked it earlier, he moved it." She jabbed a finger at me again. The crowd wasn't buying it anymore. "Even Mrs. Thompson whispered, 'She's losing it.'" The officer exhaled slowly, patience thinning, and turned back to me. Before I could speak again, Karen stormed forward and grabbed at my shirt, screaming, "Arrest him. He's dangerous." Her grip was tight, desperate, reckless. Training kicked in. My hand instinctively clasped her wrist gently but firmly, removing her hand from me without force. The officer shouted, "Ma'am, step back." She ignored him, lunging again, her son stepping forward as if ready to escalate. "You don't belong here," he snapped at me, voice cracking with anger. Something inside me cooled, sharpened. My identity wasn't something I flaunted. But when he spat those words, that hateful edge twisting through them, I felt the final boundary snap. "I do belong here," I said quietly, voice carrying enough weight that the nearby whispers stopped. "And before you continue lying to these officers, understand something." I paused, letting the silence build, letting the crowd lean in, letting Karen freeze mid-rant. "You have no idea who you're dealing with?" The officer glanced at me curiously, sensing something shift, something important he hadn't yet heard. Karen scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please," she spat, "you're nobody. Just some lowlife stealing food." Her voice cracked in triumph, but the moment she said it, something inside me hardened in a way that only years of service could forge. Her son crossed his arms, echoing her smirk. The air felt electric, charged, as if the entire neighborhood had stopped breathing, waiting for the next move. I stepped forward, not aggressively, not dramatically, but with the calm, deliberate certainty of someone who has spent years walking into real danger, not petty HOA theatrics. The officers watched closely, their hands hovering near their belts, not because they feared I was a threat, but because they sensed a confrontation about to break open. Karen squared her shoulders, chin tilted upward, thinking she had cornered me. Her son puffed his chest like a rooster trying to prove something, though his voice had already cracked once from the stress. The murmurs from the neighbors grew louder as tension climbed, thick and heavy, rippling across the block like the air right before a storm. I reached down slowly, picked up one grocery bag, lifted the receipt and held it up for everyone to see, and then spoke with measured clarity. "You want to know the truth? Fine." I paused, letting the silence drag, letting Karen's smirk freeze just a little. My voice dropped lower, stronger. "I'm the commanding officer of the U.S. Army Reserve Battalion stationed at Fort Branson, and I don't take kindly to people who weaponize lies." Karen's face drained of color instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. Her son's smirk evaporated, replaced with confusion, then fear, his bravado shrinking as if someone had punctured it with a needle. The crowd gasped, some audibly, some quietly. Mr. Lewis muttered, "He's military." Like the revelation carried weight, shifting the entire dynamic. The officers straightened subtly, exchanging glances that said everything without words. They recognized the tone, the posture, the authority. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, sputtering like she had swallowed her own arguments. That's not possible," she shrieked, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence, cracking under the pressure. "He's lying, that's not real." I pulled out my military ID, holding it out calmly. The officer closest to me examined it carefully, his expression turning respectful, his posture shifting. He nodded firmly, confirming its authenticity. And just like that, Karen's last fragile thread of pretense snapped. Her son took a step backward, panic flickering across his face. "Mom," he whispered, ashamed for the first time, realizing the hole they had dug. The officer turned to Karen, voice stern now, stripped of patience. "Ma'am, you filed a false report. You made physical contact with him. You lied to a federal officer." Karen backpedaled wildly, hands waving, tripping over her own contradictions. No, I didn't. He grabbed me." A neighbor spoke up suddenly. "Mr. Grayson," whose porch had been his silent witness stand. "No, ma'am," he called loudly, voice steady despite his age. "I saw everything. You grabbed him. Twice." Others chimed in, voices rising like a tide. "Mrs. Thompson nodded. Mr. Lewis raised his hand agreeing, and soon it became clear that her lies had nowhere left to crawl. Karen clasped her robe like a shield, eyes wet now, but not from remorse, from fear of consequences. "I didn't mean to," she pleaded. "I just wanted—" Her son cut her off, muttering bitterly, "You wanted attention, you always do." The officer motioned for Karen to step aside, but she backed away like a trapped animal. I stepped back as well, giving the officers room, my expression unreadable, my breathing steady. Watching her unravel didn't bring satisfaction, not the kind she expected. What brought satisfaction was justice. Not revenge, truth. The officer began explaining her rights, her violations, and how filing false charges is a serious offense. She whimpered, reaching for her son, who shrugged her off and stared at the ground, suddenly small, suddenly powerless. The neighbors watched silently as the officers took her statement again, this time with consequences clearly outlined. Her son avoided everyone's eyes, his earlier arrogance dissolved into embarrassment. But I said nothing more. There was no need to. My identity had spoken louder than any argument. My calmness had held more weight than her screams. And the truth had silenced every lie she had built.